Hi, I'm Kristen, and this is the Simple Handmade Everyday Podcast, where I talk about living a creative, intentional life. I like to chat about quilting, knitting, cross-stitching, what I'm reading and watching, a little bit about self-care, productivity, and keeping a cozy, organized home. I've got my cup of tea in hand, so grab yours, and let's settle in for a chat. This is episode 99. Welcome. It's good to be back. Man, I did not mean to take what is amounting to about a 2-month break from this podcast. I knew that podcasting in February was going to be tricky, but here we are mid-March. So I always said that I was not going to apologize for not recording as if, anything revolves around this podcast, but I did not mean to take such a long break, but it is good to be back. I'm coming to you kind of early on a Sunday morning, so early, in fact, that I'm just still wearing pajamas. I'm like, I'm going to sit down and record this morning, and then I've got the rest of the day to do my thing and edit and make show notes and get it posted. So hopefully by the end of the day on March 19th, 2023, this will go up. It is raining again here in Southern California. I didn't even know it was supposed to rain today. The rain has been relentless, absolutely relentless. And I'm not complaining. Here where I live, we were made to drain, so we're not having any flooding issues. But I know that is not true of everywhere. So we are just kind of all adjusting. I'm looking out the window at the grass in the backyard, which is, 80 to 90% green again, where it was, 95% dead in December. It's not the grass that died, though, for the most part. It's kind of a whole weedy conglomeration of many different things, but it's green, and it's so much nicer to look out on than the dead grass. So, and where we live, the watering restrictions, not that we have needed to water, have been lifted so that we can go back to watering twice a week. So we're making the decision about, I don't think we're going to do anything with the yard this year. We need to make a long-term, more water responsible plan for the yard, but that's something I'm not thinking about until next year. So I think we'll just try to keep it green and reasonable for this year, which is good because last year when everything was just brown, it really sucked the joy out of me spending time out there, which is my favorite place to be, in the backyard. And so hopefully this will, just make it a nicer environment this year. So, part of the reason it took me so long to record is I did some traveling in February. I went to Orlando on a work trip, which was, I'm very glad I went on. I was so afraid that I was going to not so afraid, in the back of my mind, I was worried that I would get COVID and then I could not go to QuiltCon, but luckily that did not happen. And nor did I get COVID at QuiltCon, which a lot of people did. So we really lucked out there. So I've never been to Atlanta. That was fun. So I'll just talk a little bit about QuiltCon right now. I'm kind of feel like everyone's probably sick. If you're a quilter, you're sick of QuiltCon roundup. So I'm just going to give you some quick overviews of my kind of thoughts and what happened there. Oh, I'm looking down at my cup of tea. I always forget to talk about my cup of tea. I today am drinking a new to me tea. I was over at Amazon Fresh. We have an Amazon Fresh grocery store, which is like one of those weird stores where you just go through, you put things in your bag as you shop, and then you just walk out and it all tallies up. It's crazy. But I need to do a return there. And that is the one place where I can buy this mango ginger tea that I drink in the mornings when I'm working because it doesn't have caffeine and it doesn't hurt my stomach. And so it's the only place I can get it right now. So I get a couple boxes of that. And then there's this green tea kombucha, also by Yogi. And so I'm trying that, and it's pretty good. It does have caffeine though, so we'll see how that goes. But I'm drinking Yogi green tea kombucha. Anyways, back to QuiltCon. I think I talked about this probably in previous podcasts, who knows, but I shared an Airbnb with my little group of quilty friends, Frances from the Off Kilter Quilt, Patty from Elm Street Quilts, and Jen from Quilt and Jenny. And it was so much fun. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but it was a little craftsman style. I want to call it a bungalow. It was so pretty. And it had been recently used in a movie, as a movie set for an upcoming movie with Anne Hathaway that the name is escaping me right now, but that was very exciting to us. And so it was all just really done up very beautifully. I one night talked to my husband in this little outdoor porch area, and I mean, it was just a gorgeous house. So that was really fun, and that just lent itself to hanging out at night, drinking wine, just chatting about, life. And then after the show, lots of chatting about the quilt show and modern quilting. One night we went out to dinner with Holly Ann over at String and Story. And she actually, in past QuiltCons, has stayed with Jen and Francis, but Atlanta is her hometown there, and plus she's got a whole business to run. So she had her own place, but we went out to dinner and then back to our little house and just spent hours just drinking wine and chatting and eating chocolate and talking about modern quilting in general and specific. And it was absolutely wonderful. It's just so fun to chat with a group of people that just like really are passionate about the same topic. And I mean, I feel a little bit out of my league on modern quilting. It was funny because I was telling Francis, I've never even made a modern quilt, which is absolutely not true. I've made like 3, it turns out. But I guess I've never designed a modern quilt, which is something I would like to do. So the show was absolutely just full of inspiration. In past QuiltCons, I have in some ways felt a little defeated because the quilts are so spectacular, many of them, that you just feel like, oh, I could never do that. But I don't know if my headspace was just just different this year, but I did not feel that way. I mean, there are definitely quilts that my brain just doesn't work that way. And it was really fun to walk the show. I walked the show with different people. I walked a lot of the show with Jen, and we kind of are very much the same in that we've mostly made more traditional quilts, but we're interested in modern quilting, and we are constantly blown away about how people even think to do certain things, the creativity on display. I walked a lot with Patty, who is a very accomplished modern quilter. So she has very interesting takes on things. And then Francis and I did not get enough time to walk the show together, but she's I feel like looking at it almost from a more academic perspective and really finding the patterns and the influences and things like that from it. So it just depends on who you walk with, what you focus on. So that was very fun to have that mix of people to explore the show with. I did notice that there were the whole show was full of curves, like so many drunkard's path or quarter square circles. I think that was the other name I saw them described as. Lots of curves done in different ways. So that was very interesting. I felt like that was a theme of the show. I don't know if the show curators or the jurors realize that when they were, or that's just what a lot of modern quilts are these days. So that was very interesting. I remember when I went, and I think it was 2017 or 18, whenever the last show was in Pasadena, I remember thinking that there were a lot of prints, like small, more like, ditzy prints incorporated into the quilts. I felt like that was all but gone. Like we played with that. We don't like it. We're back to solids is how I felt about that. Also, long arm quilting, there was definitely still a lot of it, but I feel like matchstick quilting was back. Not just straight line, but matchstick quilting was everywhere. So it was just, Sean Kimber was the keynote speaker, and she was amazing and inspiring. And I looked at her exhibit before her keynote, but then I had to visit it again afterwards now that I had more context on her journey, some of those actual quilts. That made it just all the more inspiring. So she was a wonderful featured quilter. I was trying to think about some things that I wanted to take away from the show, which is more, to me, going to QuiltCon is more like going to a modern art museum than a quilt show. And I think that's why I like it so much, because I love going to modern art museums. And I did take the time to read a lot of the artist statements, not everyone, that you just couldn't get through the show. And I only had 2 days to get through the show, which sounds like a lot, but it went so fast. As a matter of fact, on I was leaving Sunday morning. So on Saturday afternoon at 2, I kind of panicked. I had like 3 hours. 3 hours I had to get through whatever I had missed and maybe go back and visit some favorites. And turns out I had plenty of time, but I had a little moment of panic. But a lot of the artist statements talked about things like, I was in a class with so-and-so, and like, this is what I did with those blocks, or this technique that I learned. Or I participated in this challenge and this quilt came out of that. And then, I'm always talking about how I want to get into making some modern quilts, but I almost don't know where to start because, as Jen and I would say, my brain doesn't necessarily work that way. And I realized that maybe what's missing in my formula here is that I need to take some classes and participate in some challenges, like the Curated Quilts puts out a challenge every month. And I know there's some other ones. My friend Patty, she does a lot of these. And I think that is a lot of where she gets her inspiration, or you just get to play around with techniques. And that the techniques part is, I think that, why I need to maybe take some classes. I did log into Craftsy, which is back as Craftsy. Remember, it was something else for a while. What was it, like Blueprint maybe? I don't know. Anyways, I wanted to see if I still had access to those classes. And I do. And one of them is taught by Jackie Gearing, where she kind of talks about some of the elements of modern quilting, like scale and off-grid designs and things like that. So I think I'm going to review that to get some inspiration. Also, my friend Sarah Goer, who I met in person at QuiltCon, she has some great classes about angles and planned improv and all kinds of things. And I should probably get into one of her classes as well, just to get some of the skills involved. There were a lot of inset skinny strips in the show that I think is kind of more of an advanced technique. So that's definitely something that I want to challenge myself with this year, taking some classes and literally doing some challenges. So it was just so much fun to be able to meet a lot of these people in person that I've only ever seen or talked to online, including Susan, who's a listener and in the Simple Handmade Everyday Facebook group. And it was just, I was able to meet her for coffee one morning, and it's just so much fun to meet these people that you've been chatting with online in person. So Susan, it was so fun to meet you. All right, let me tell you a little bit. I didn't buy a lot there, but I did buy a tea towel, a Ruby Star Society tea towel, because this is my new thing of stealing from Diane in Denmark of souvenirs that are tea towels. I got one in Florence, Italy, and I got one from QuiltCon. And when I use those, that it just, brings up really good memories. I also got the chance to meet Michelle from Aliso. I've worked with Aliso for years, and it was so fun to meet and chat with her in person. Also, Chris from Modern Vintage Handmade. He makes those beautiful wood quilting tools. So I won a set a few years ago that is like a seam ripper and a Hera marker, and one more thing, and I can't think of what it is right now. Maybe a one of those things you poke the corners out, like a stylus type thing. I wish I could remember right now. Anyways, they are beautiful. He also does a lot of clappers, that wood that you lay on top after you've ironed your seam, and it helps set the seam better. And now these beautiful full block clappers that have like a block design done with inlaid wood. I mean, they're just so gorgeous. And I saw him on the first day I was at the show, which was Friday, and they were already selling out of things. People were just scooping these things up. So we have a giveaway planned this summer. So stay tuned for that. That will be amazing. Okay, so I did buy a few. Paintbrush Studios had solid fat quarters for $2, which was a deal. So I got a handful of those. And here's one thing that I bought. I've got it right here in front of me. I bought some cork. So Patty, that I talked about from Elm Street Quilts, she's such an amazing sewist. And she brought 2 bags that she'd made. She'd made the range backpack from Noodlehead a few years ago. And I feel like there's this little part of me that wants to make that backpack. But I don't know. I mean, making those kind of bags are just, it's not my bag, pun intended. But hers was so gorgeous, and she did it in such like modern colors, like very mustardy, and I think it was lined in something maybe navy. Sorry, Patty, I don't remember. I just know that her fabric choices were exquisite. And then she made just in one day the new noodle head pattern, and I don't know what it's called, but it's almost like a little fanny pack type thing, which now, or crossbody, people wear them that way. You can wear it different ways. And the flap on it was made of cork, not fabric, which looked super cool. And then she also had like a wallet, and you can do like a business card holder made of cork. And what's cool about sewing with cork is that you don't have to turn anything under. Like, so you just sew it and it stays together, and you don't have to, flip it, get those seam allowances inside or anything. And so while I had the opportunity, I went over very last minute, like right at 5:00 on the very last day of the show. I got sort of like my signature color blue, kind of a turquoisey blue piece of cork. And then when I was in the booth, they had a lot of samples out. And so I got just natural looking cork as well, because they look really good together. They had a lot of examples like that. So I don't know when I'm going to get around to doing that, but they gave me like a little postcard that has a link to their patterns online and some free patterns. And so the cork is just like, the guy actually spent a lot of time explaining how they do this. There's like a fabric on the inside, on the wrong side of the cork, that they lay down and sort of spray with an adhesive. And then they take these, and he's like acting this out, these, like a huge sharp blade, and they just, cut slivers, like wide, thin slivers of cork off the cork tree, and then lay them down on this adhesive on this fabric. And that is how they make this cork fabric. So it is a little expensive. I got, these are both like 13 by 18 squares, and they were like $9. So, it's like not hugely expensive. I felt like I could take a risk on it, but I mean, they're very labor intensive to make. So I get that they cost something. So that was fun. And my favorite purchase, and maybe I'll try to take a picture of it, and I don't even know how to explain it. It was also another woodworker, this man on the very back of the vendor hall, like, I don't know, facing the wrong way, just like in the farthest reaches of the vendor hall, had this guy who makes these beautiful sewing caddies, pin cushions, even lamps that are in this shaker style where it's like, again, sort of thin pieces of wood that are wrapped in round and oval shapes. And so I ended up buying a little oval sewing caddy that's wood. It seems like the perfect thing to upgrade my table in the living room where I sew. Instead of having, just this mess of threads or whatever, it's just now I've got my, mostly right now it's cross stitching, but I also hand piece. So it's just a little sewing caddy. It's maybe a foot wide at most, maybe a little, and then, I don't know, 6 inches. It's an oval, so like that shape. It's got a handle on it, and I missed out because I dropped. It took me 3 times by this booth to actually buy something, and he even said, "This is your 3rd time to this booth," because it's handmade wood, it's artisan. It was a little expensive, but I just felt like I loved it and I wanted to support him. But he was working on some prototypes where the handle that came out, where you would hold this little caddy, he inlaid a magnet in it so your scissors would stick right to it, or pins or whatever. And it was so brilliant. But by the time I bought it, those were gone because everyone recognized them as brilliant. But what I did find out is that my needle minders that I use that come from Fat Quarter Shop are strong enough that I can actually put a needle minder on that with a magnet on the back. And so, which is nice. And again, I'll take a picture. It's just nice to have your scissors right where you can grab them pretty easily, a little high like that. So anyways, it's absolutely gorgeous, sort of shaker style. No regrets. It was a pain in the butt to get home because I was afraid to pack it, and I think I was right. So I had to carry it on the plane, so it was all crazy. But anyways, the whole experience was wonderful, and I'm so glad I didn't get COVID there. But the next year, it's in Raleigh, which is in Francis's neighborhood, and so I am already looking forward to going there. Before we continue with the rest of the quilting segment, I'd like to thank the Fat Quarter Shop for being a sponsor of this podcast. The Fat Quarter Shop is a one-stop shop for quilting fabrics and supplies for quilters around the world. They stock quilt shop quality fabrics, pre-cuts, quilt kits, patterns, notions, and even cross-stitch supplies. This month, the basic of the month is Zen Chic Spotted, and this is one of my favorite blender fabrics. You should go, I'll put a link in the show notes. You should go over and check them out. It is the perfect blender fabric that just has this these spots on it that gives your project so much dimension. The other thing that's going on over there is a new quilt along called Home Again. So this is a pattern, I'm looking at it right now, by Lori Holt, and it is published by It's So Emma. It's a vintage 2-color quilt pattern. The pattern photograph is a red and white quilt, but what's very cool about this is they give 9 different colorways on the back of the pattern. So you can do a 2-color quilt, and they have them all mapped out with Lori Holt fabrics for each colorway. Of course, you can use whatever you want. You can use your stash or whatever, but they give you a ton of inspiration here. They've got colorways for red, tea rose, which is a pink, pumpkin, daisy, alpine, teal, denim, plum, and raisin. So just like so gorgeous. So you could absolutely, if a red and white quilt is not your thing, you can find the right colorway that would fit your personality, or alternatively, you could do it as like a 2-color rainbow thing, which would be very cool. So anyways, you might want to check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes. All right, on to quilting, which I've actually been doing. I've gotten kind of back into sewing. I do love to quilt. Sometimes I forget that. But 2 projects have gotten me back into it. The first one is the Scrappy Spools Quilts Along, also with Fat Quarter Shop. And that's these, another Lori Holt pattern. Sorry to be so designer focused right now. But they're these small blocks. You just do like 4 blocks a month. It's a very nicely paced quilt along. Of course, I'm already a little bit behind. I'm just behind 2 blocks, and I'm going to get caught up this month. So they're just, kind of traditional blocks. Sometimes, like I've already knocked out the 4 patches and log cabins. Right now, I'm working on what is it's probably got a real name, but it's kind of a riff on a churn dash. It's kind of a more complicated churn dash. That was February's blocks. And then March are some flag blocks. And then at the end, you set them in this little setting that makes it look like spools. I did head over to my local quilt shop, which is called Cotton and Chocolate, to get a low volume background for the background for this, which is just part of the spool blocks. And then I was been trying to figure out, what do I want the spool ends to look like? So in a fun turn of events, I was able to have coffee with Robin Pickens, who is a Moda designer, and she is the designer of the Moda Basic Thatched. Have you ever used thatched? I did a whole thatched quilt for our last hand piece quilt along. It's also one of these fabulous blender fabrics that is just gives your product so much more dimension than using just solids, which I have trouble using just solids sometimes, so I love this. So I had coffee with her and Susan over from the Felted Pear, and they know each other. Susan does some sewing for Robin, and it was so much fun, again, to just like sit and really talk quilting and the sort of the quilting business and things like that with some people in real life, because there's just not that many people that I can do that with. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to do a little segue right here to say that when I was at QuiltCon, I noticed that there was a few people who were in the show from the Ventura Modern Quilt Guild, which is my local modern quilt guild. I did a couple meetings during COVID online because it's just really hard for me to get to Ventura at the time that the meetings are. And then I dug in even deeper and found out that one of the women that had quilts in the show lives in my town. So we are definitely going to have to meet up and have coffee. So that was just like, wow. So maybe that friendship will be my entry into making more modern quilts. Back to Robin Pickens and Thatch. So she actually so generously gave me a color card. God, I can't tell you how much I love color cards. And so I was able to really look through the browns to figure out, because I want to use thatched as my spool ends. It's like the perfect, it's not wood grain, but you could certainly mistake it for wood grain. And I think I'm going to go for, I'd made this decision before. I think maybe it's either oatmeal or cocoa. Maybe it's oatmeal, which is a medium brown. Cocoa's a little bit darker. So anyways, that is very nice. So I think I've got my spool ends. I still need to order that fabric. Very, very exciting. So that's the Scrappy Spools Quilts Along. And then I mentioned before that I kind of got back into the Great Granny Square quilts that I started about a year ago, and really got some momentum going on that. I feel like I could make those blocks forever, because every quilt block is a little bit of a composition where you're just using 4 different fabrics. And so it's a 20 block quilt. I've got 18 done, and it's funny because I got 18 done and up on the design wall, and then I just got stuck because at this point I put them up there so I could go, okay, what do I need my last 2 blocks to be to make this balanced? And that has seemed like too much of a decision to be made. So I haven't done that yet, but I'm going to get back to that. And that's very exciting, because then that's just sashing and that quilt top will be done. So I'm very excited about that. But what the issue that came up when I really spent some hours sewing in the last month is that my 1/4 inch seam allowance has gotten a little bit sloppy. Now for the Great Granny Square, it kind of doesn't matter because they're all the same block, and as long as they're all the same, it doesn't matter. But as I was working on the Scrappy Spools Quilts Along, the finished size, I wish I had that pattern here. They're small. They're like maybe finished, unfinished is like a 5.5 inch block. So it'll be finished 5 inches. And there's some piecing in there. So when you've got a lot of little pieces, your seam allowance matters. And I was realizing these are coming out too big. And, just by a little bit, but it all adds up. So I used to be so picky about I still am. I guess I just forgot I needed to check it. I'm picky about my 1/4 inch. I like to be accurate. I like points. I like things to match up. It just makes quilting that much more fun. So I got some scraps and I started, sewing my 1/4 inch and pressing it and measuring it and just realizing that, I really need, so I have a Juki with a 1/4 inch foot that has that blade on the edge, and my blocks were coming out big, which means that my seam allowance was too small. And I realized that I really need to get that fabric right, not wrinkled, but right up against that blade. And I think that I was not really concentrating on that. I don't love, I do and I don't. I do like having the blade because it does really give you, a nice thing to guide your fabric along. I've done various things. I've built up painter's tape that gives you even a longer, edge to butt your fabric up against, and that's nice. What's bad about the thing with the blade is that if you ever, want to sew a half square triangle or something, I've done it, but it's hard to get that blade up over on top of the fabric. So then you're changing out feet. So I did some digging. There is another, so the foot that comes with the Juki, they call it a scant 1/4 inch foot, but it is 3 threads scant. So, it's a really skinny, it doesn't work for me. I wish it did. And so, but they do sell another one. I think it's about $30 though. So I might get that. And then the other thing that I found as I dug into this is that somebody makes for like $15 this little quick change spring that you can put on your Juki that makes it much easier to change the foot. So if you do need to change your feet quickly, you just have to push it in and with your finger, and the foot just drops off, and then you just put the new one in where, it's instead of unscrewing things like you have to right now. So I might invest in both of those things. I'm not really sure. But anyways, the moral of the story is if you are dissatisfied with the size your blocks are coming out, spend some time sewing a 1/4 inch, down, 2 inches of fabric, press it, measure it, and make sure that you know exactly, where you need to sew to achieve that perfect 1/4 inch. The other thing that I realized as I really got chain piecing with these blocks is that I could really use a leader and ender project. I made a whole Bonnie Hunter quilt with some really questionable fabrics, actually, because it wasn't just a leader and ender. It was just kind of also a scrap buster of fabric that I had but didn't love. But in that true Bonnie Hunter thing, it's like there's no ugly fabric. If you think it's ugly, you just haven't cut it small enough. So it was this kind of an Irish chainy type pattern, and I loved it. I gave it away. And it, again, when it was all together, I really liked the way it looked. I should dig out. I wouldn't mind doing that pattern over, but there's lots of those. I should just go through some Bonnie Hunter free patterns and, find something that's, uses 2.5-inch squares, because I would love to have another leader and ender project going. It's just having that bonus project seems so smart. All right, so before we leave the quilting segment, I want to talk about Fat Quarter Shop. Man, they are knocking it out of the park these days. They've sent me some quilt patterns. I think I'll talk about those next episode. But what I want to talk about today is this book called Summer Memories by Susan Aki. And she is a brilliant quilter and cross-stitcher. And she has a book out published by It's So Emma, the publishing arm of Fat Quarter Shop, called Summer Memories. And if you like patriotic quilts and cross-stitch patterns, you are going to absolutely love this. So all the quilts in this book are red, white, and blue. Now, of course, you can make them whatever color you want, but it does, when I'm looking at this picture where they're all laid out, and it does give you such a summer vibe. It just feels like it's July as I'm looking at them. So let me tell you about some of these quilts. There's a couple I want to highlight, and one is called the Flag Day quilt, and the whole quilt is one big flag. It's 52.5 by 80, and I didn't count it, but it probably has 50 stars in the star section, which are, what's that? That's a sawtooth star there, and then the stripes are done scrappy in a like a tumbler block pattern, which it's like a triangle with the ends cut off that just kind of, alternates. I don't know, that's a terrible description, but anyways, it's a tumbler block. And she did them in some very scrappy red and white prints. Oh, and then the whites are also, as I'm looking up closer, are low volume whites. Oh, so there's just so much movement and so much so much happening in such a simple quilt, since it's just one large flag. So I really love that one. There's also one called the Summer Picnic Quilt that is, it's a basket quilt. And so it's got basket blocks, and it is just, so perfect for a summer picnic. And the other one I really like because it has such a vintage feel. Like, I feel like my grandmother could have made this quilt, and I mean that in the very best way possible. The Veranda Quilt, and she did this one just in blue and white, and in her note she was saying how she loves to do this pattern, which sews up very quickly because it's done with strip sets, and to do this, a whole 2-color quilt in different colors, a whole like pile of them. I might need to make that. That's beautiful. And then bonus, because she's also a brilliant cross stitcher, part of this book are cross stitch designs, and again, they've kind of got a patriotic theme. We've got this one I really like. It's called Cherry Season. So it's got like a little cherry tree, very simplified, kind of prim type cherry tree, and one with a hot air balloon. And a lot of these have definitely that antique sampler vibe to them. There's one called Freedom Flowers, which if you do cross stitch, there's a lot of samplers that have kind of like an urn with flowers coming out of it, and so that's what that one looks like. There's ones with words: equality, justice, hope, peace, and one that says, "This land is your land, this land is my land." So they're all very small, kind of things that she's got them mostly made up into little pillows, or a couple of them framed. But anyways, so this is Summer Memories by Susan Aki. If you love those sort of patriotic quilt or cross-stitch patterns, this book would totally be your jam. All right, speaking of cross-stitch, I've got some to report on that too. I never check my notes before I start these things. So I hope I didn't say this before, but I finished the Plum Street Samplers pattern called Autumn Cottage, which again has that sort of antique-y look to it. It's a house block with these kind of stylized vines around it. It was my first project where I used fancy floss, so I had to I didn't have to, but I chose to change my technique to really see the fancy floss is hand dyed, so there's more variegation. So they want you to do like a one stitch at a time as opposed to doing half crosses one direction and then come back. So that was fun and just a good sort of way to stretch my skills. But it was always such a relief to go back to my flea market flowers, which just uses DMC, so I can use a faster technique there. But I'm excited about finishing this one. I haven't finished it yet. I'm going to do a little pillow, and I bought some chenille trim from Lady Dot Creates on Etsy. I bought 2 colors because I wasn't quite sure which would go best, and I'm still not sure what I'm going to do there, but I'm excited about finishing that one. That was such a fun, quick stitch and a good way to introduce myself to some fancy floss. Now, the other fun thing is I got involved. I bought there's this thing called Cross Stitch the Rainbow, or it's written X Stitch the Rainbow, and it is a collaboration that happens in fall and spring. I mean, that's what it was this year, where together they pick a thread set from somebody, and so this time it is Treenway silks. So they pick like 4 flosses and then challenge 25 designers to come up with designs that are, I want to say 60 by 60 or smaller. It might even be, I should check. So small designs that use that floss with a theme. So I did autumn, what was it called? Like Autumn Garden. I didn't buy I got into it late. I did not buy the actual floss. It was like a fancy floss, but I did do one pattern from it and they gave a DMC equivalent. So this time I was like, I want to get in on the actual floss. So it was Treenway silks. I've never used silk, so it's like fancy floss on steroids. It's been very nice to work with. And then the theme was basically like tea time. So could it be more Kristen? No, I don't think it could. So I did buy 2 patterns, and they're very inexpensive. They're like $6 patterns from Top Knot Stitcher, where I actually bought the floss through her and then a couple of patterns. And the one I'm working on now, I actually started it on my birthday. Pardon the zipper noise here. And it is called a top-notch cup of tea, and the design features a little stack of books with a cup of tea on top of it. Very cute. And I decided to try linen again, so I'm using 32 count linen on this, and I picked this pattern because the stack of books, which is, you see it from the side, so you see the pages and stuff, so it's a lot of straight line stitching, nothing very complicated. And because I did try linen on the Autumn Cottage, and I gave up on it very quickly. So this is a simpler pattern. Of course, you can do it however you want, but this is very cute. And then the other pattern I got is it's kind of has a botanical theme. It's actually, I think it's supposed to be like a tea bush. So it's a lot of leaves and with a little cup of tea in the center. So those are my two tea time patterns that I'm looking forward to stitching. And I will definitely do the other one on something a little easier, like 25 count Lugana or something, because if I'm going to stitch on linen, I need my Halo Go light and magnifier, which kind of means that I need to be sitting at a table. I just don't have the right setup to use something like a tabletop magnifier if I'm sitting in a chair or at the couch. Although my husband and I were just recently furniture shopping for the room I'm sitting in right now, because that's my goals for this year, is to redo the 2 kids' rooms to reflect this season of life. And there was these little tables it's not what I was looking for at all, but I just saw them. I'm like, that would be so perfect. I guess maybe it's an updated TV tray in a way, but it's kind of C-shaped, and so like it'll slide under the couch, but give you a work surface or an eating surface. I'm like, oh, that would actually work really well for me to sit on the couch and have a little table to work on. So I might need to look for something. None of them kind of fit my vibe, but it was like, oh yeah, that would be a good idea. So anyways, so I finished the autumn garden, working on the tea time, still giving myself a break by working on flea market flowers, which I'm definitely coming into the home stretch on that one. And I've definitely decided that I am done buying cross stitch patterns until I finish some of the ones that I have. Because I don't want to accumulate at this point in my life. But let me tell you about some of the cross stitch patterns that are coming out from Fat Quarter Shop. They've sent me some, and I'm definitely going to do some giveaways. I've been a little overwhelmed at work and things like that lately, so that's why part of the reason I haven't podcasted for a while. So maybe next time I will have my stuff together, and I will do some quilt pattern giveaways. You know what? Next episode will be 100. That's perfect. And I totally blew past my 5-year mark on this podcast. So next one will be 100. I'll be doing some giveaways. How about that? But in the meantime, let me just tell you, the Fat Quarter Shop is doing this thing called the Chicken Club. And they are little cross-stitch patterns of chickens. And so if chickens are your thing, and I know they are a lot, for a lot of people love the whole chicken theme in their kitchen. Everyone has like a little, they're named and they're just slightly different. I've got in my hand Cornelius, who is more of a rooster, I would guess, and a little chick. And then this one is called Florence, and they're just absolutely adorable, designed by Lori Holt, who absolutely loves chickens. So if that is your thing, I think you can buy them separately, but you can also join the club and get a new one like every month or so. The other new series that Fat Quarter Shop has going is called Stackables, where it's a long, skinny pattern with a little basket in the bottom, and all these kind of things that, in a way that it's long and skinny. So the basket's on the bottom, so things could be like in the basket theoretically, although I'm looking at these things and none of these would really go in the basket. But it's a monthly stitch that if you created one finishing piece, you could just swap it out every month. So I have the January one, which has a snowflake, and it's all very blue and white and gray. Looks like snow on trees, snowflake skates, and a little hat. February has like a cupcake and a cupid bow and some lovebirds and roses and things like that. So that's another new series this year that the Fat Quarter Shop is doing. And because I completely blew past February, I didn't talk about the Valentine's things that they have coming out. But I'll give these away and you can get started on them for next year. Again, a long skinny piece that says "Be Mine," a very cute little Valentine piece. But if you got into the little... at Christmas, they did these little cookie cross-stitch patterns that were round, and then you can finish them with these cute little tins. Well, if you like that idea for Christmas, they have one that are for Valentine's Day. They're called Sweetheart Ornaments, and there's some of the designs are like a little letter, the date, a cake, a little camera, a heart, like a love lock, a little what looks a little bit like a diamond ring, just cute little. And so those small quick stitches, you could finish them. You can make them into little pillows if you have like a dough bowl, or like so many things you could do with them. They have them sort of hanging on a little thing of white wooden beads. Very cute. So tons of new cross stitch stuff coming out from Fat Quarter Shop. And again, too many for me to do. I will spread out the wealth next podcast. The other thing that Fat Quarter Shop does so well are their little enamel things. So there's a new needle minder from Lori Holt. And I have a pink one here that's like a little bee. There's a zipper pull or a keychain charm of the little house blocks that are so common. And then now they even have like a big sort of, I use binder rings to hold my floss for a project. And I just have literally ones from the stationery store, but this is one like that. So it's a big round, silver ring with an adorable like little heart and gingham charm on it, just to make, stitching that much more adorable. All right, let's start books. It's funny, I know I've read more than this, but I cannot. I even got out of the habit of jotting down things while I was on my podcast break here. But the one book I definitely want to talk about is called Remarkably Bright Creatures, and I have to credit my friend Pam, my British friend Pam, for making me read it. A neighboring town here through the library does a one city, one book kind of situation, and she said, do you want to read this book, and then we can go listen to the author speak, which we're going to do next month. So the book is Remarkably Bright Creatures. It is from Shelby Van Pelt, and it is her debut novel, and it was such a delightful read. So the gist of it, and I went on Goodreads, and people have absolutely nothing but glowing things to say about it, and it was a very quick read. I blew through most of it last weekend because it got to a turning point where different storylines started coming together, and I just could not put it down. So it is about the main character is a woman named Tova, and she is a elderly cleaning woman at an aquarium, kind of a nice aquarium, a Monterey Bay aquarium type thing. And she realizes at some point that, well, actually very early on, that the giant octopus is getting out of its tank at night and basically having adventures. And so that is, and part of the book is actually told from the perspective of the octopus, which was so fun. His name is Marcellus. And he and Tova on some level strike up an amazing friendship. Meanwhile, she has her own backstory. She is a widow. She lost her only child many years ago when he was young. And, that is just still weighing on her. And her life's really changing because her husband recently died, and she needs to figure out, what she's going to do for the rest of her life in terms of realizing that she doesn't have anybody to take care of her, as she's realizing as some of her friends are moving in with their grown children and things like that. And then there's another storyline about a young guy who's very, aimless, but he's quite smart, and the way and then he's headed to the same town where she lives, and it's just, I don't want to give too much away, but it is a delightful story. I highly recommend it. I cannot wait to go listen to the author speak next month, so I'll let you know after that. While I was traveling, I listened to the audiobook Next in Line by Jeffrey Archer, which I got on Audible, and that was also delightful. I've told this before, but in case you're new, I'm going to tell it again. So I love Jeffrey Archer. One of my favorite series of books is called The Clifton Chronicles. It's many books long, and they are super quick reads, and you just, every book's, I'll warn you, is a cliffhanger, so you just go from one to the next. And in that book, in that series, there is a guy that is writing stories, writing mystery novels. That is his job. He's a very successful mystery writer with a main character called William Warwick. And after Jeffrey Archer finished the Clifton Chronicles, he started writing the William Warwick series that was featured in the other series of books. And I'm not sure which number this is. This is maybe book 5 or 6, and they are delightful, quick reads. If you like Jeffrey Archer style books, they're wonderful. So that was a great audiobook to listen to, especially because I had some very unpleasant flights, center seats, long flights. So I just needed to escape while I was flying, and too crowded to knit or cross stitch or anything on the plane. So I just had to close my eyes and listen to the book. That was wonderful. Okay, the next book that I want to talk about, do not laugh. It is called Laundry Love: Finding Joy in a Common Chore by Patrick Richardson. And it is literally a book about doing laundry. And it was sitting on the coffee table when my daughter was home last week, and she looked at it and she's like, "Are you seriously reading that?" And I said, "Yes, I love it." And she said, "I feel like if someone created a parody movie about your life, this is the book that would be on the coffee table. And I need to, I have read it through. It's from the library, and I feel like I need my own copy. But it really is, it's about taking care of your clothes. It's about getting off of commercial laundry detergent, which when I, was in my eco-warrior days, when the kids were little and stuff, and I was making my own laundry detergent, and it was just sort of unsustainable for me. I gave it up. And so then I just, I found, not Trader Joe's laundry detergent never worked, but even Costco had their Kirkland Signature environmentally friendly brand. They don't have that anymore. So now I'm on, knockoff Tide Pods, which I know are bad for the environment. There's microplastics, but man, and you can't do smaller loads because it's apparently it's too much laundry detergent, even for a normal load of laundry if you have an HE washer. So anyways, he kind of just breaks down how you should be doing your laundry, which involves using some very old-fashioned ingredients like soap flakes, like washing soda, and ways to get out stains, which my husband had a cut on his finger and got blood on the sheets, and I used his method of getting blood out, and it came out like no problem, which includes like using a little horsehair brush and just all kinds of old-fashioned but perfectly good ingredients. Now, the snafu I had with this is he has you use soap flakes, and he also, interestingly, talks about things that are sort of counter to the way we're told. He's like, warm water, a tiny bit of soap, and the shortest cycle possible, which I know we're told to like wash everything on cold, right? But he has all the science behind some warm water. It's not going to fade your clothes, and it makes warm water penetrate your clothes better. So anyways, and if you're going to use soap flakes, you kind of need the warm water to dissolve them. So I tried that, and it was kind of a fail. The soap flakes did not dissolve. I actually had to wash that load 3 times, finally with a Tide Pod, to just get it all out. And then I look back, and then I wish I had read all the reviews about that particular style of soap flake, that people did complain about that. And then I'm like, maybe my water's not really warm. You know how you can kind of adjust it at your washing machine? So I ran a warm load and then stopped it to feel the water, but it is warm. So I need to find the right soap flake. But even if I don't end up using soap flakes, I'm going to get off the Tide Pod knockoffs. It's with a Costco version of them, and start getting back to some more environmentally sound ingredients for my laundry. So anyways, you might want to check it out. The reason I want my own book is because, there's so many very specific things about how to get different stains out, and how to care for things. Also, he's got all these sprays, and I actually bought some little spray bottles so that you could make, for different things. You want a spray bottle with some alcohol for certain stains. There's a one that you fill with like cheap vodka for certain odors, things like this. Is kind of funny. So I'm going to dig more into this, but you might want to check it out if, like me, you kind of want to be good at things. We actually have watched some movies, and I actually meant to ask my husband before I started this, because I know we watched a movie and I cannot remember what it was, but we watched The Banshees of Inisherin. I don't know that I'm saying that right. I apologize if I'm not. It was nominated for an Academy Award, and I hadn't seen any of the movies nominated for Academy Award. So when Chloe was home last weekend, we watched that, and it was the weirdest movie. I got to be honest with you. What would have been good to know going in, so I'm going to tell you, is that the whole thing is a metaphor for the Irish Civil War. And not that I know a ton about the Irish Civil War, but just knowing that made it make so much more sense. And so it is basically, it's got Colin Farrell, who is only a name to me. Now I know who he is. It's in some remote area of Ireland, like an island, and like very few people on this island. And this guy is just young, I don't know how he is, 40s farmer. He stops by his mate's place because they go out to the pub every day at this time. And his friend, who's an older guy, he ignores him. He won't even, you can see him through the window. He will not even come to the door. And eventually he talks to him and is like, what's the deal? He goes, I just don't want to be friends anymore. I'm done with you. And the whole movie is basically about that, about why does this guy all of a sudden have no patience for his former friend? And that is the whole movie. And so it takes a bit of a dark turn halfway through. But it was beautiful. It's just like it's on this beautiful, if not slightly desolate, Irish island. The acting was beautiful, but I was unprepared for how quiet it was. And so again, I think it makes more sense if you kind of realize that it's a metaphor for the Irish Civil War. But anyways, I have no regrets about watching it. It was a fun rainy afternoon for us. And then I had a birthday a week or so ago. My husband and I have the same birthday, which I know is very weird. I probably mentioned that before. So we took a half day off. It was on Friday, and took a half day off and went to a movie. We're actually going to go to I forgot to talk about this, the Fabric of a Nation quilt exhibit, which was at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. And I wanted to go. So we were going to do that in the afternoon, but it turns out you needed tickets and they were sold out. So we went on the very last day, which was March 12th. And my daughter went, and that was an absolutely lovely exhibition that really showed just the history of quilt making and what women before us were doing with fabric choices and messages and techniques, things that reflected social class and politics. It was wonderful. And so I was glad actually that it turns out my daughter could go, because I think she really enjoyed it too. But anyway, so we're like, we need to do something fun on our birthday. So that afternoon we just went to a movie, which we haven't done in ages, in a theater. And we couldn't, like, none of the movies in the theater had I ever heard of. I'm so out of touch with movies. So we went and saw something called Operation Fortune Ruse de Guerre. And it was a fun spy kind of movie, kind of like James Bond, but more humor. It was quite funny, with lots of action and car chases and helicopter crashes and things like that. It was basically like this. The gist of it is there's this super spy, like James Bond type character, who needs to stop this man who turns out to be Hugh Grant, doing a kind of a British accent I've never heard him do, and Hugh Grant was delightful in this. So he needs to stop this Hugh Grant character from selling this new weapons technology. And the way he goes about it is the Hugh Grant character is just loves this actor, this particular like superstar actor. Like if some guy just like could not ever get enough of Brad Pitt, for instance, and so they convince this actor to, in a way, play a role and to get in with this guy, and it's hilarious. It's got Aubrey Plaza in it, and it's just your typical spy thriller, but very fun way to spend the afternoon. Yeah, so, that's kind of it movie-wise. Oh, we watched Forks Over Knives. When I came back from QuiltCon, Jen is vegan, which sort of just reignited this again, latent feeling that we're eating too much meat. And so I talked about this in our Empty Nest Chronicles, one of our posts recent, called Our Evolving Diets, that, so we're trying to eat more vegetarian. I was experimenting with a vegan before 6 type thing. That's been really hard. Vegetarian's not a big deal, so I think I'm just going to stick with that for a while. And I know there was another movie in there. I can't remember. On the TV side, some of the things I've been watching, like on Acorn or BritBox while I've been stitching, season 6 of Line of Duty. If you have watched Line of Duty, a British cop show, season 6 came out and it was excellent. I also experimented with a show called Bloodlands, and it's also like a British cop show. And the first season was good, but I don't think that I will watch anymore because there's just kind of like too much dirty cop stuff happening there that I'm just like, I don't know who to root for, so I don't want to watch this show. So that was a bit of a bust. My husband and I finished Peaky Blinders, which is I've talked about on other episodes. It's a fantastic show, but it is so brutal and bloody. It is very hard to watch, but the storytelling was amazing. And that's exactly how I would describe what we're watching right now, which is 1923, which is, so you know about Yellowstone. I've talked about that with Kevin Costner. It's good. Also, hard to know who to root for, who is the good guy in the situation, and it's also bloody and brutal. But also, so then they spun that out to 1883, which is the origin story of how the Duttons have this land, Yellowstone, have this ranch. And now we've got a couple generations later in 1923, and this has Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren as their part of the lineage of the Dutton Ranch. And again, it is so bloody. And at least in this case, I know who to root for. But there's also a whole story with a Native American residential schools that is very brutal and very hard to watch. So yeah, we need like something, super happy-go-lucky. So I don't know what that is for my husband, but for me, that is a show on Acorn called Mount Pleasant, which is just a super fun kind of, it's about 10 years old, but it's just about this little neighborhood in Manchester, England, and all the shenanigans that go on between the neighbors, and it's kind of just very real life, and it portrays some really good marriages, and it's kind of a fun show as well. All right, so we're at about an hour here, so I'm going to wrap this up quickly. I just wanted to say that I mentioned that I had a birthday, and the presents that my family gave me were all pampering things. So I got a gift card to a spa, and I went and had a facial yesterday, which I highly recommend. And there was enough left on it. I'm going to do a 30-minute massage in a couple weeks. One of them got me a pedicure gift certificate. One of them, my daughter got me some like bath bombs that she very specifically picked out for me from Lush. And I did one of my bubble bath yesterday. So I mentioned before, it's been a kind of an overwhelming time for me with a lot of travel and a lot of work, and this just taking some time for some self-care and pampering is exactly what I needed right now, and I just highly recommend it with things like Mother's Day coming up. And I very much said I don't want anything like physical for my birthday. Like I've got stuff, I'm trying to get rid of stuff, so I wanted some experiences. And I gotta just say, this spa in our town just did such a beautiful job of making it in the most relaxing, rejuvenating hour of my week. It was absolutely wonderful. So make sure you take time for things like that, whatever that looks like for you. I know that's not everybody's deal, but it is mine. All right. Thanks again for listening. I will try to get back here at a more reasonable time next time. You can find me online at my blog, Simple Handmade Everyday, where I put complete show notes and links to all the things that I talk about. On Instagram at Kristen Esser, and please consider joining the Simple Handmade Everyday private Facebook group to keep the conversation going. Have a wonderful week.